I kind of hate talking about myself, to be perfectly honest. I love talking about the craft and the work and the process and the experiences. But then people will be like, well, what about you? And I'm like, I don't know. That's what? Me? No. Pursuing this craft and this way of doing life. It's, there's nothing else I could do and be human.
Welcome everyone to Fox Encounter. I am here with the awesome Tiffany Cornwell. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great as well. It's not like boiling hot here in Arizona, so it's good.
Yep. I've got my air conditioning going because it's not quite boiling hot. It's actually a little bit of a cloudy day in Los Angeles, which is rare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was there back in April, like at the beginning of April. It said it was like maybe like 80 degrees or something. I was like, oh, that's perfect. I go, but it's like really windy. So it ended up being like pretty cold.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So I moved to Los Angeles from Minnesota back in, you can hear it in my accent. I say Minnesota still. I moved here back in January and I was surprised at how cool it was here. Not Minnesota cold, it's not -20. It's, you throw on a light jacket and you can do anything. But I still haven't gotten a handle on the weather here because if it's sunny, even if it's 78, it's hot. But if it's cloudy or there's shade and it's 78 and there's a breeze, then it's cool. But if it's nighttime, then it's probably cold, even if it was 90 during the day. So I've just learned layers. The only thing I've gotten a handle on is just wear layers.
Yeah. And first question up, I know you don't really like talking about yourself, so we'll get this one out of the way really quick. And it's, what is it about? Like, how did you first get into acting, and like, what was it about acting that kind of drew you into that field?
Yeah, well, I joke that the first time I was a professional actor was when I was 3 months old, and I played Baby Jesus in the Christmas pageant at my parents' church. And that's when I was hooked, which is not really entirely the truth. But I was always drawn to it, always creating characters. My mom has these videos of me, like I would dress up as characters in the stories that we were learning about. So if I was learning about Greeks in school, I would dress up like Greeks and make Greek food and put on a pageant of like what it was like to be in ancient Greece. Or if we were learning about the pilgrims, I would dress like a pilgrim, or I would dress like, whatever we were learning about, that's what I would create from just a very, very young age. And I just kept doing it until probably high school and got hooked on Shakespeare, which is a very dangerous drug when you are 16 years old. But yeah, I started doing Shakespeare with this professional Shakespearean company. I got one line in Julius Caesar, which was, "I will, my lord." But and I'll never forget it because it was just the biggest deal to be working with these incredible professional Shakespearean actors at this, it was called Shakespeare by the Sea in Jupiter, Florida. Mm-hmm. And the more I did it, the more I knew I just couldn't do anything else. And I've never stopped from there. So I just keep pursuing it. At some point in college, I realized, people always say like theater, film, you go back and forth. I lean more towards film, although I do miss live theater and I will do it again. But at some point I started pursuing film a little more, started doing filmmaking myself, writing, producing, that sort of thing. And I don't know, it's just... There was a time in my life when I tried to not say it's who I am because I still find it a little bit pretentious and a little bit, I don't know, a little bit too much because I'm so much more. But I've also found that all of the things I am outside of the craft influence and build on and create within the craft. So while it's not who I am, it's also who I am is what it is, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. Before all of this, I probably wouldn't have got it, but we're talking with like different actors and producers and writers. I'm like, I really understand this now. And you said you had a little bit of background in the theater and stuff. Do you happen to find that like the atmosphere of the theater a little bit more nerve-wracking because you have all of those eyes on you at once, or do you find like the set filmmaking a little bit more nerve-wracking because you still have a few people there on set? It's just
Yeah.
not like, you know, the huge audience you would in theater.
Yeah, it's not. So it's not the audience that is nerve wracking. Anytime that I feel nerves, it's always this buildup of expectation until something is created. So all of the craft and the work of the character inside of me. And then when I'm on stage, it's as soon as I say the first line, I'm better and I'm in it. I just have to get out there and I have to speak. Like I have to release it from my body. And the first day on set can be a little nerve-wracking because you're like, oh gosh, did they cast me right? All of your anxiety is all over the place. Am I going to do this well? What am I doing? Where am I standing? What's the relationship with the director going to be like? What's my relationship with the other actors? And then by day 2 or 3, especially if you're doing a feature, you start to, you know, you get to know the cast and the crew, and you know, it's more like you're working with people you know and you trust. So, well, in good situations, obviously there are situations where that doesn't quite happen. But in my experience, my favorite experiences have always been by like day 2 or 3. It's just you're just working with the best people and completely just doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you mentioned that it's like a release because it really is, especially like with that theater background. You have all of these lines, or like even if you're a dancer or a singer, you have all of this energy that you've kind of been, you know, practicing and you know, rehearsing and stuff. And then when you finally do it, it does feel like a huge weight lifted off of you.
Yes, it's so cathartic. I had a conversation with a friend recently about something called, she called it Vulnerability Hangover, because I had reached out just to some other actor friends and after a day on set and been like, does anyone else experience this where you've spent a day working or you've completed a project, and then for the next like 24 hours or sometimes up to a week for me, it's like you're just depressed. And it feels like you got your gut ripped out of you, and it's hard to like exist in the real world again. And it just feels dumb because I just had the best time. I did my favorite thing. It was amazing. And a couple of friends reached out and said, yes, that is an entirely normal experience. All of us feel it. But one of my friends in particular called it a vulnerability hangover, where it's like you spend time being so vulnerable and so cathartic, and you are releasing grief or fear or joy or whatever out of your body, and then you pack it up and you leave and you go back to your life. And it's interesting how like it takes my body a minute to readjust.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very common thing among actors because you're like that just shows us how, you know, like with method acting and stuff like that, it just shows just how much in the character you are. And a lot of the times that really does show in the performances, especially the performances that I've seen of yours. Like that really does show.
Thank you. Yeah. The more that I do this, the more I become like weirdly like woo-woo and spiritual about it, which I never thought I'd be that way. But it feels like this buildup of like energy that is not always yours. Like you don't recognize it as your own self that exists within your body. And then you live through that and you release it. And then you have to readjust to being yourself.
Yeah, that must be like a pretty weird feeling at first, but I feel like after a while you'll probably get used to it.
You welcome it. There's a book called, actually, I think I have it on my bookshelf here. Yeah, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, where she talks about creativity and ideas and art almost being their own thing. And they come to you and ask you to bring them into the world. And I don't totally buy 100% into that. I like the idea of it. I like the idea that these characters choose me, or come to me, or allow me to create them. That that it's not just me. I'm working with something. Mm-hmm. Who knows if it's true? I might be crazy, but you have to be a little crazy to be an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, throughout history of most of the greatest artists, whether it be like, painting, musicians,
right.
they're all a little nuts.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit ago about like, kind of gauging these relationships with your co-stars and stuff like that. I like that you actually mentioned that, because a lot of people don't really mention the building of a relationship with their co-stars, because a lot of times, and it's not a bad thing, but a lot of times the actors, you're there to actually put in your performance, and you're just so deep into your own character that you kind of put everything else to the side. So I do like that you kind of mentioned that, because I noticed that a lot of people don't really mention that. Like they're actually wanting to, make sure they put in their own performances. But I also like that, you mentioned that you want to make sure that your relationship with these other people on set is, is great.
I actually think that it's really easy as an actor to fall into being so focused on yourself and so focused on the work you've done and so focused on the character that you are, that you don't think about the people around you. But I think to have a good performance, and all of the best work I've done has actually been when I've done the work and I've allowed and trusted that to exist within myself. And then I focus on the person that I'm with, whether that be focusing on ignoring them because that's what's right for the scene in the moment and the character, or focusing in on what they're doing or paying really close attention to them. But building the energy internally, you need to push it out to them. You have to influence them, even if it's just in a look or a word, or like honestly, even if I'm not totally on camera the entire time, it's not human interaction, human life doesn't happen alone, unless you're in something like Castaway, in which case it happens with like a ball. But unless it's a film where it is happening alone. But if you're in a room with people, those people are influencing what's happening. It's not just you most of the time. So to me, my co-stars and the people that I'm working with and the moment that I'm in is as important as all of the hours of work I put in leading up to it. And I have to trust the work I've put into it and then let that go, because I'm having an interaction with another person. I have to listen to them. What are they doing? What are they thinking? What are they reading from me? What am I gauging from them? What do I want from them? What do they want from me? What is this relationship we're having? It doesn't, acting is so much harder alone.
Yeah. And that really does come across in a performance, because you can always tell when people are being very genuine, especially like when people are playing siblings or a couple or friends like that. You can always tell when it's genuine, and you can always tell when those two performers really do have a strong bond in real life.
Yeah, it's kind of like, do you remember when you were a kid, maybe if you went to summer camp or something, and you had this like amazing experience where you meet the people you think are going to be your best friends for the rest of your life. And then you go home and you talk to them like 2 more times in the rest of your life, and you still love them. But it's kind of like that, at least on a feature film, especially if you're in a feature film on location. So you're all staying in a hotel together or staying at whatever housing together. It becomes like this really intense relationship building with a large group of people. And then, I'm still friends with and have hung out and still communicate with most of them, but they're not always going to be like every single day the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But you do. Actors go in and we go, okay, we're going to build these relationships. Let's start building these relationships off screen. Or I'm not going to build a relationship with you because I need to hate you. So until I'm done needing to hate you, I cannot be your friend. I've seen that happen too. I've never done that. I'm not method by any stretch of the imagination, but I have seen that happen on set where people have had these very calm conversations of, I'm not going to be friendly with you. I'm not going to sit with you. I'm going to keep myself distanced from you because that person was method. And it showed well in their performance. It went well for them. It's not my technique, but
it's like right after they're done shooting, they're like, all right, hey, let's hang out later.
No, I've seen that. I saw there was a scene where these two characters, one of them, or these two actors, one of them was a method actor and had very respectfully been like, I'm not going to be friendly to you on or off screen. And then they filmed like the last scene they needed to, where he needed to have that feeling towards him. And literally they finished filming and he walked over and gave him a hug. Like as soon as he didn't need that anymore as a performer, there was this just beautiful moment.
And having that theater background, so there's a lot of improv that kind of goes into those sometimes. Do you prefer a lot of improv, or are you like strictly by the script?
I love improv. No, I'm okay if we need to be by the script. I love it when the director says, okay, just whatever comes out, comes out. I love improv. I love dramatic improv. I love comedic improv. I love improvising conversations that you don't use, but just help you to build a relationship between the characters, build memories together in character of things that happened that like guide the scene a little bit. And I've done a lot of improv, like been part of improv troupes, performed improv. It's so fun. I miss it. I will be doing it again as soon as there's a little more live improv going on. I feel like the virus kind of improv is one of those things that hasn't quite come back as strongly.
I think improv is like it's a very unique thing that like it's known, but it's not as like well talked about. I think like a lot of stuff that like, even a lot of our own like favorite films, a lot of that stuff has a ton of improv in it, but we just don't really know about it. But I like the idea of improv a lot, especially because it's something that just comes naturally, and it's something that's coming from within you because you are that character. And I think that kind of makes that character more unique.
I think you can't tell when it's scripted if the actors have rehearsed it and if it's well done. Because like we can't discount the writers. They like the reason the characters, I build my characters based on what the writers give me. So if I am that character and if I am improvising, I am able to do that because the writers gave me something to work with, gave me something to build. And I love that. And like with comedy, I mean, you've got these brilliant writers. And if I'm given incredible comedy, I'm going to make that look as good as I can because, and it's going to look natural and it's going to make me look brilliant. Like good writers are priceless. You know, they say a film is made 3 times. So it's made when it's written, it's made when it's made when it's edited. And I tend to get recognition because people see me, but everything that I do depends entirely on the writer, the editor, the director, the lighting, the gaffers, the best, like everyone. I mean, even catering and crafty, like I could not give a good performance if I didn't have food in me. I can't give a good performance if my hair and makeup doesn't look good and someone else had to think about my hair and makeup for me so that I'm not having to expel extra energy doing that. That's one of my favorite things about this art is it's not me. It's not alone. It's not siloed. Everything I do, like an editor can make me look terrible or fantastic. A writer can make me look terrible or fantastic. And so like as an actor, I get more recognition and I don't hate that, but it would be wrong of me to forget that the reason I look good, the reason I'm getting recognition is because of the people who worked tirelessly to make me look good, to make the art happen.
And as far as just a regular like moviegoer or film lover, they really only see like the surface level stuff. Like we'll see, I've always been, that's kind of the reason why I wanted to talk to different people that are involved in filmmaking in terms of like stunt performers and writers and producers, because I realized from an early on, because I was that person who would watch the credits after the movie. And I was always so interested. It's like, wow, that's a lot of people that go into making this movie. They really only see like the stars and, you know, maybe even the director. There are a ton of great films out there that have been made and like no one knows the name of the director. So I was always like, this is really interesting. Oh, that person, like, what does that person do? Or I'll read, you know, the credits and be like, wonder what that person does. That seems really interesting.
Most of the people that I'm very close with a lot of people who work on, you might say below the line is one of the terms, but I tend to just absolutely fall in love with a lot of people. And often, like, I mean, you talk about the PA who drives you to and from set. Like, that is a really important job. They're keeping you alive and safe. Sometimes at 3, 4 in the morning, they're keeping you safe and driving and taking care of you. And then you have hours long conversations and you meet these incredible people. And then in the film, it's just shown as, you know, their name, PA, or, you know, production assistant. And they're like, but they're a huge part of making the film, you know? Yeah.
A community of people with all these different talents to make these films that we love so much.
It's amazing to see. It's a glorious life to live.
And do you happen to have like what was like your earliest memory of like, was there like any one film or like your earliest memory of like when you kind of fell in love with film?
Yes, in college. So I had started to fall in love with film a little bit in college. But I think it was my junior year. I drove to this audition and booked this student short film. And we ended up shooting it on a soundstage. And it was probably the first time that I'd been on a set where it looked and felt like what I now know a professional set to look and feel like, and not I shouldn't say just a student film. That's not what I mean by that, but not a film experience that I'd had up to that point. And it like, there's nothing bad I can say about it. It was just a wonderful experience. I probably don't remember every single moment of it. It was definitely not the best performance I've ever given, but it was, I mean, I was what, 21. I mean, I was still growing and learning, but that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, even those smaller performances and stuff like that, or even if you think they weren't that good, it's the experience that kind of like makes it very special.
Yeah. And I wasn't terrible. I'll take credit for not being terrible.
And like what about a project would you say is like is there like a deciding factor when you decide to work on a project? Like the one little thing, maybe it's the script, maybe it's the writing, or maybe even like, you know, the character, maybe it's the setting. Like what about a project is like the deciding factor of like, I want to work on this?
Oftentimes it's the story of it. So the writing is a huge factor. There have been a couple projects I've wanted to work on where maybe the writing wasn't the best, but they were willing to be flexible about that. So if I needed to, you know, change up a line to make it sound a little more natural for me. But I wanted to play that character or that genre. Or a lot of times it's, I want to work with someone. So the director or the producer or the writer, they're people that I want to work with. It's really, there's a lot of deciding factors. If it's a terrible script, which does not happen often, I will gently decline but that doesn't often happen. That's happened maybe 1 or 2 times. And no hate to anyone. I mean, writing a script is a huge undertaking. And oftentimes maybe the script is not terrible, but I just don't feel like that's not something that I want to give a month of my life to. Or the story, sometimes, I mean, there have been 1 or 2 where they send me a couple of scenes and I'm going, this feels like really abusive towards women, or this feels like they do not understand the times that they live in or the times they're writing about. And I don't want to be part of a project that feels like it's like fantasy or or something like that. Like when that happens, I will gently move on with no notes. But sometimes, it doesn't happen often that I've said no to auditioning. I mean, more often than not, I'm the one getting the no. I don't often say no. I'm more likely to get the no.
It's definitely a no for me, dog.
I've got
no
like
notes.
4 this month.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because we often don't talk about the scripts that we pass on, especially as an actor and stuff, like you were saying. And that's because we want to be nice about it and stuff like that. But that's also and I wouldn't think of it as anything negative. I would think of it as a more of a learning process. Like, okay, they said no. What about this can I fix? Or what about this would be more appealing to someone? Yeah.
Or it might even be like, if someone says no to a project after they've read your script, I know that can be, because I've had that happen as well, where I've written a script and someone said they didn't want to direct it. And I know that can be difficult. There's no harm in asking why. Like in some cases, when someone didn't want to direct it, there were 2 people who didn't want to direct a script that I had written. And both of them were for reasons of they didn't connect with, they thought the script was good, or they didn't connect with the characters, or they thought I was going in a direction that I wasn't planning on going. And in both cases, I was really grateful that they said no, because I found the perfect director after being told no multiple times. And I wouldn't have had the same film if and performance and work if they had said yes. And I ended up finding the perfect person. So I, as a writer, I'm grateful for the no's, because sometimes it's not an insult to me. It just means that their vision is not matching up with my vision, and they're not feeling it, and they're giving me space to find something else. So yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Had to learn that the hard way, but whatever.
And speaking of that, kind of learning these positivities, how do you personally stay positive, in navigating the film industry?
Well, depends on the day. I don't at times. It's not about staying positive. It's just about staying in it. I've spent too much of my life trying to live in unimaginable joy at all times and completely ignoring my own grief and my own pain and my own anxieties. And I'm a pretty naturally positive person. I've taken the Strength Finders test where they tell you what your top 5 strengths are. One of mine is positivity. I'm a pretty high energy positive person, but I think that it is really important to acknowledge the sadness and to acknowledge the things that are hard, and to grasp onto and work on creating color within your own world. And it's hard sometimes. I get told no 100 times before I get told yes, 1,000 times before I get told yes. I'm critiqued on my skin and my hair and my eyes and my body and my abilities and my vulnerability. I'm critiqued on my ability to be or not be vulnerable. That's hard. That's going to be hard. But also, I I've experienced the highs of being on an incredible supportive set with incredible people, creating something that I really believe in. And those will hold you over for a long time. So being in class really creates a lot of positivity for me. Being around other creators, continuing to work, continuing to create, not just doing my day job every day, really helps too.
Yeah, I that's a very, very tough job that a lot of times we don't, or I guess we kind of like try to not pretend like it happens, but it really does, especially with female actors. Like they do get, you know, a lot more criticism than I would say male actors, because you're being looked at in a way where everything about you has to be pleasing, not just your acting, but like the way you look. And
I'm a commodity.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing to kind of have to go through. And it's like you really do have to have very thick skin for that kind of work sometimes.
You also have to have incredibly thin skin, because the vulnerability part, I would say, is even more important than what you look like. The industry had, you know, especially with social media, we love beautiful people, and we will always love beautiful people. There's nothing wrong with beautiful people being beautiful. But the thing that draws us to to people is not like Anne Hathaway, not just stunningly beautiful, also has an incredible ability to be vulnerable. Olivia Coleman, maybe not the most beautiful person you've ever seen, beautiful, but she's not a 20-year-old supermodel. But when she is working, and her work is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, because her ability to be vulnerable and truthful and listen and feel, it's more beautiful than anything you will find in, I don't know, I can't think of anything more beautiful than that. So I mean, it's not just someone who's beautiful. Then, you know, it's someone whose work, whose vulnerability is beautiful. And I would rather watch that 1,000 times.
Going back to you know, like getting a lot of the highs and the lows, and you know, getting told no 1,000 times, and then when you get that yes, you're like, yes. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I know exactly how that feels, especially with, you know, with this podcast and what I do. Fully understand that, and it kind of hits me pretty personally, because there are times where you reach out to a lot of people, and you reach out to certain people that you really want to talk to, and they're just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
And you're
or
like,
they ghost you entirely. Like they just never respond. You can see that they saw the message and you never hear from them. It's like, what is it about me that makes me not worth saying no to?
Yeah. Even when I'd rather have that. I've had people like very excited to do so. People that are like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. I got an hour to kill on this day. I got nothing else to do. That's fine. I'll take that too. And I'll even take the email or the DM like, hey, you know, right now I'm just really busy, blah, blah, blah. That's totally fine. But when you just get the like seen message and like no response, you're just like, oh, okay.
It feels awful. It's the worst.
Yeah, but then when you do get those yeses, and when you do get people, very humbling people like yourself, it does feel good. You're just like, yes, okay, what I'm doing is worthwhile.
It feels like being seen and some piece of you being known or wanted. I mean, that's, if you were to boil it down to like why I want to be an actor. Viola Davis had this beautiful Oscar speech. And I don't remember it by memory, but she said something along the lines. She was talking about August Wilson exhuming those bones, and then she said, I chose this profession, and thank God I did, because it is the only profession that celebrates what it means to live a life." And I could listen to that speech over and over again, and also watch literally anything she does. She's incredible. But that's like the moments where I get to like speak the voice of someone who lived a life that isn't often celebrated, and celebrate what it means to live a life, celebrate what it means to exist in grief or through grief, or build something through that, celebrate what it means to love and maybe to lose or to win, whatever that is. Like that's the joy of it. And I was in an acting class, and my teacher had this video, and he was talking about how there was this guy who saw a performance, and this woman in the performance lost her son. And after the performance, this man was mocking her for the noises she made and what she sounded like in the scene, the actor. And then he wrote her 3 years later, and he said he had to apologize because that's what it sounded like when they came to his door and told him his son had died. And thank her for, even though someone in the audience thought she was ridiculous, she was so truthful to that moment that when it happened to him, he felt known. He felt like someone could see what he was feeling, and thanked her for that work. And that's what I love, is like, I want people to feel known. Whatever it is I'm doing, someone else in reality is living through this, is existing through this, and portraying it. I am only becoming more human. Like, that is the goal, to become human, whatever that means, but to become human so other humans feel known, seen, loved, wanted, part of something. That's the core of it for me.
Yeah. And that's really what it boils down to when we think of our own, our favorite movies and stuff. A lot of times our favorite film is, the character or the story or anything about that is something that we can relate to on a personal level. Mm-hmm. My favorite movie is The Godfather, so I don't think that really counts for me, but
Okay. Well, if there's anything scary, you need to talk.
Yeah, maybe there's something there. But
it's also an incredible film. So
exactly.
My favorites are the ones that make me stop critiquing them as films, and I just get swept up into them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think taking the film class in school is kind of it helped me a lot, but also it just made me critical of everything, and it just took the joy out of it. So I always tell people you be careful with that, because it will take a lot of the fun out of just watching movies.
Yeah. I also think it adds a little fun, but
yeah, it does. It really does. So I guess you got to kind of compartmentalize, I guess.
Yeah.
And do you happen to have a favorite movie?
I mean, all of my favorite movies are the ones that I've called favorite since I was in high school. So they're not maybe the best movies ever made, but I love The Sound of Music very nostalgically. That is my go-to feel better about things movie. I love Much Ado About Nothing with Emma Thompson. That is probably the movie that made me want to be an actor. Shakespeare nerd. But also the character of Beatrice and the way she portrayed her at the time made me feel very seen and known in a way that I didn't. And I can analyze that now because I'm an adult. So those are probably the first two that come to mind. If we were to sit down and go through a list of movies, I'd probably be love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Yeah. My Girl made me sob hysterically when I was in middle school, to the point that I had friends who were like, stop, you're being dramatic. And I was like, I can't stop crying. Bumblebee. Slumdog Millionaire made me almost stand up in my seat and cheer at the end of it. I was enamored with that movie. The most recent Spider-Man movie just blew my mind. And there was maybe even nothing in it that made me feel especially seen or known or loved or wanted or whatever, but it was so good. It's such a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are always the best ones, where you do have a really good time. My son and stuff, he's really getting into movies now. And even if the movie's not great, like in terms of like substance or whatever. When he has a great time with it, I have a great
You
time.
have a great time. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's even the people that you see the movie with really
Yeah.
influence it.
Like the first Wonder Woman movie, I think is just
Mhm.
great. And not only because it's just a great movie, but I went to see it with my mom because it came out on her birthday. So that
Yep.
one has a special place.
That's got
in
a
my
special
heart.
place in your heart.
You've done some work in like period pieces, like westerns
Mhm.
and stuff like that, some dramas. Is there any genre so far that you haven't done that you would want to do?
Oh goodness. I mean, honestly, I want to do westerns again, but this time I want to be the one that's on the horseback doing the riding. Because you play a woman in westerns, and often that means that you're not the one. I mean, I've driven the carriage. I've just never I actually ride horses. Like I owned horses in high school. So I want to be the one on horseback, like saving people. Let's see. I've done a little bit of this, but I would love to do more character-based, like almost sitcom comedy. And I'm working on writing one or two of those. I'd love to do action adventure sort of thing. I love doing period pieces though. Love doing period pieces. Yeah, there's not a lot I wouldn't want to do.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the Western is a very underappreciated genre because now, I mean,
It's
back in the day,
back a little.
yeah, it is. Because back in the day, like Westerns were huge.
Everything.
Yeah, my dad was a huge like Clint Eastwood fan, so I've probably seen every Clint Eastwood film and probably every other Western film ever made.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I thought Westerns were like everybody loved them. And then I got older and people were like more into like comic book movies and science fiction stuff. And anytime I brought up a Western, they're like, yeah, that I don't really care for Westerns. I'm like, what? Like, when did this happen? and with the introduction of like the neo-Western, which I think is great because there's elements of there's the elements and basics of a Western, but it's just more modern, like in films like Hell or High Water or No Country for Old Men, stuff like that.
Yep.
And yeah, I have been seeing that there's been a lot of Westerns coming out that are really great. And I feel like more people should be watching out for them.
Or even Westerns on TV. We've got Yellowstone, 1876? 1896? 1876? The prequel to Yellowstone. Even television series are doing the Western genre more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those, like when I see those, I'm like, all right, yeah, we're watching that one.
Yeah.
And like with your even like the Westerns that you've done, can you talk about those?
I can talk about them a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I know some of those are in like post and are in post.
They're in post right now. Yeah. So, I shot two Westerns actually in May of 2021 and then also August of 2021. The one in May was set in the 1890s, and I played a nun traveling through the Badlands of North Dakota, who rescues an outlaw, and shenanigans occur, except not comedic shenanigans always. And that was an amazing experience. It was also, maybe one of my first times getting out of like my COVID cave and being around people again. And we were quarantined in the actual mountains of North Dakota, or the hills of North Dakota, with some mountains thrown in, and just a mind-blowing experience. And that one, Sanctified, will be coming out, I think, end of this year. But really that's up to how post goes. And then the other one, called End of the Rope, is based on the true story of in the early 19, well, in the, like, I think it was the late 1930s, early 1940s. True story. This man basically slaughtered a family. And the town, so he was caught by the police. The town heard about that, and they were so enraged at the thought that because the death penalty did not exist in North Dakota at the time. The town was so enraged that he murdered this entire family. And they had already hated him. He was already not well loved, that they broke into the prison, fought the police, broke into the prison, stole him in the middle of the night wearing hoods, dragged him out to a creek, and hung him to die. And like we were filming it in the town that it happened in. So it was a very interesting experience. We were playing either real people who actually were part of these situations, whose family would be on set, or like my character was really a combination of two or three of the women who existed at that time. Like we went and visited the graves of the family that he killed, with that sort of stuff. So that one was a murder mystery combined with a Western. So that was also an incredible experience.
Yeah. I love the combination of genres when it comes to Westerns. Like there aren't very many out there, but there are like a few horror Westerns that I think are just really cool, because when you think about it, that time was a very scary time. Not only do you have to like worry about like people or outlaws trying to kill you, but like, or especially like early settlers, you're just out there in the middle of nowhere.
Just out there.
And like you don't know.
You break your leg, you might die from it. Like
your nearest neighbor might be like a couple miles away.
More than a couple, 100.
100, yeah. So that genre, I think is like really interesting, and I would love to see more of that.
Yeah.
And I would also love to see more like action-oriented Westerns with female leads. I think that's something that really hasn't been done very. So yeah. So we'll get that started. We'll get that into the universe for you.
I'll finish up one of the scripts. I have to finish outlining them and then write them and then pitch them. So we'll see what happens. But I have a couple ideas.
Yeah. Sanctified, and you play a nun in North Dakota. Was it what time of year was that shot? That
was shot in May, but it was still snowing.
Yeah. Oh, it's still snowing. Okay, because when I was watching
we had snow on a couple of days, mostly sleet. And then we also had 90-degree days. So it was a really wide range of weather. The nun's outfit. So I was wearing like pretty much what a nun authentically would have worn in the 1890s, which was a lot of layers and very uncomfortable. Do not recommend. Especially the face covering, because it's just like holds onto your face so tightly. But one of the nice things was on the colder days, I would be perfectly warm even without a jacket. So there were so many layers that I was comfortable. The bad thing was I got a little bit overheated on the 90-degree day. Just a little bit. But they took care of me. So it wasn't bad at all.
When I see these, like a lot of these period pieces and like a lot of the layers, especially that the women had to wear, I'm like, how are they not boiling hot in this outfit right now? Or how are they not freezing right now?
Yep. Really depends on the day and the weather. If you're shooting indoors or outdoors, it depends on a lot of factors. But I was like heat and warmth wise, I was pretty comfortable for most of that shoot, luckily.
Yeah. That's why I love period pieces so much, because like I just sometimes just will watch it and I'm like, why did we dress so ridiculous? It's kind of fun. The ridiculousness of like some outfits, and I'm just like sitting there like, why was this allowed?
I mean, they'll say that about us in 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. They'll look back and be like, why was this allowed? And especially harder for like my own people, because I'm Native American. So anytime I would watch a Western, they're like, some of them will be able to wear furs, some not. And I'm just like, that must have been very uncomfortable.
Yeah. We had in Sanctified, one of the characters is Native. And we had a guy out there who is actually Native from North Dakota. Incredible. His name is Alan, incredible human being. Loved working with him. But what was really cool is he, in working with the production, he would actually source his own with the production got his costume from people in his tribe who would have been the native tribe in that area at the time in that period. And he did his own hair and makeup in the style of his people. So that was a really cool experience in that it wasn't just like the writer's understanding of a Native person, but it was a Native person having an influence on what was said and done in the script and even how they were portrayed, which I thought was really, really cool, and so cool to work with Alan in that way.
Yeah. I just love that the Native American culture is getting a lot more recognition nowadays, especially like even in modern I mean, yeah, you have like Yellowstone and stuff, but even like modern TV shows now, a TV show that I love, I don't
Yes.
know if you've seen it, but Resident Alien with
I
Alan
haven't seen that
Tudyk.
one yet.
Yeah, that one, I watched it because I love Alan Tudyk, but it turned out to be, it turns out that there's a lot of Native American influence in it, and it was very surprising to see. And I was like, oh, wow, like I just watched this because I love Alan Tudyk. For someone like yourself whose career is just like starting to like, get going and stuff like that. And I'm sure we're going to be seeing some great things from you in the future. What would you have any kind of advice for someone who's just starting out in acting? Like any kind of like.
Yeah. I guess not so much advice for someone who's starting out in acting, but things that I wish I had known or been told or could have absorbed when I was younger. First, build a life, because as much as acting or the work of being in filmmaking might be your life, the more we want to see people with interesting perspectives. And you can't build a perspective if the only thing you do is acting class and think about film and talk about film and exist in that space, but you don't go on vacations or build relationships or exist outside of that. So it is valuable, and it is even part of your work to build your perspective and to do things that aren't film and filmmaking, because they will influence and they will make you a better filmmaker. They'll make you a better actor. That's the number one thing. And that goes for writers, directors. I mean, you talk about directors, you can see a director's influence on a film through their own unique lens, through how they view the world. And so if they don't have a unique lens, if they look and sound and feel like literally everybody else, okay, like that's great, but go build a life, whatever that life may be, and then use those experiences in your filmmaking. Build your lens, build your perspective. So that would be my biggest thing. Then the other thing, I had something else. Stay humble enough to stay in class and stay working. Getting coaches, going to classes, working on projects that you believe in because you want to learn something from the people you're working with. There's no shame in not being paid $1 million for a film, or in continuing to work. I mean, the greats still have acting coaches. They still work with a coach. So just stay in class, keep growing. But the biggest one for me is just building a life and allowing yourself to build a perspective, because your unique perspective is what will make your work great.
I think that's just a kind of a great thing to know in general for just life, like it's a constant learning experience. Even if you've reached certain heights, there's always more room to grow. There's always more room to learn. I don't think we should ever stop trying to learn, no matter if we think we're at the top of our game. We can always learn some more.
Exactly. And the people who are at the top of the game, they're still learning.
All right, Tiffany, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come sit down and talk with me. This was very fun.
Thank you so much. Nice talking to you.
All right. You have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.